There was a man who, on a Saturday afternoon, rushed down to the local supermarket to buy some snacks. The big game was on TV that afternoon, and he had to buy some things for friends he invited over to watch the game with him. So rushing through the store, it was very, very crowded. But he headed towards the line that had 12 items or less. It was very short. But just before he got there, a woman cut in front of him, and she had a grocery cart just loaded with groceries. He was infuriated. So she pushed her cart through, and then the cashier said to the woman, "My dear, which 12 items would you like me to sell to you?" Kind of laughed when I heard that, and that kind of reminded me of the gospel story today. She was very clever in her response there. And this woman in the gospel is very, very clever as well. She persists. I think it's one of the few times, if maybe the only, where Jesus seems to be challenged and the other person wins. She's very insistent that he help her to cure her daughter, save her from this demon. And Jesus was in Tyre and Sidon because he wanted to get away from his hometown because he needed to spend special time with his apostles. And of course, the apostles get annoyed with this woman too, saying, "Lord, just give it to her and get her out of here." And Jesus, of course, doesn't respond to that. And when he says it's not right to take food of the children and give it to the dogs, well, to us, that sounds pretty awful. We find it to be a very contemptible statement. But we may envision a mangy street dog. But the word in Hebrew for dogs in this context is a lap dog or a puppy or a pet. And the woman must have understood that meaning of the word. It was almost an expression of affection, actually, of Jesus for her. And so she continues. She has definitely received from God the faith to trust in Jesus. And he sees that and says, "Oh woman, how great is your faith." And of course, he cures her daughter. What the scriptures tell us today, and in this gospel, she was a foreigner. The Jewish people still felt that they were the chosen people of God, and God did not come to redeem the foreigners, just them. Jesus here helps this woman, and he goes beyond the cultural norms. First of all, she's a woman, and secondly, she's not accompanied by anyone, so that would have forbade Jesus to a Jew to talk to her. And then secondly, she's a foreigner and someone despised by his people. Jesus changes all that. His heart is moved with love, and he helps her. The first reading today says that God, my house is a house of prayer for all peoples. Jesus is reminding us that he came in the world to save everyone. Every human being that was ever conceived in the womb was redeemed by Christ on the cross. And it's something for us to think about and keep in mind today, isn't it? We are in a situation where many immigrants are looked down upon just because of what's happening in their nation. But not every single Middle Eastern person is a terrorist at all. And not every Muslim is a radical Muslim at all. And those protested who feel accused, and we have to be sensitive to that people deserve, it's the foundation of our country, to welcome all people here, to give them a home if they're fleeing a place that's very dangerous to live. But it's a lot for us to pray about and a lot for us to think about. We cannot judge somebody just because of their race, creed, nationality. That's not what Jesus would do. I think of Father Edward Flanagan. You all remember him. He founded Boys Town after World War I in Nebraska. At the time, the economic situation was so awful, and many young people, boys and girls, had to leave their homes and go out and fend for themselves. There were hundreds and hundreds of young people just out in the streets, and many of them just being despised. like they're no good, they're just hoodlums, they're on the streets, they're in gangs, all this kind of thing. Father Flanagan looked at them all and remember his famous statement, there's no such thing as a bad boy. And what he meant was that the boy is good. He may have not been raised well, he may have not been educated well, he may not have been loved well. And Flanagan would draw him in. He bought 1,500 acres of land in Nebraska and founded Boys Town. 20 years later, there were 6,000 youth at Boys Town, homeless youth who came for another chance. And it still exists today, of course. And not only boys, but girls as well are welcome at Boys Town. And I think that's an example in that time, from that time, that young people who were being despised, someone reached out and drew them in, showed them love and care, and they changed their lives. So many of them have testimony in their lives about how great Boys Town was for them. And I think today we're seeing the same thing. There's so many people so grateful that they could accept a very difficult life in their home country and come to the United States. So we have to pray, and we have to try to always remember, what would Jesus do? It's a bigger problem than you and I individually can solve, but we can certainly pray for it, and we can certainly do what we can to welcome strangers in our church, in our neighborhood, wherever it is, to get to know them. The Lord calls us to love everybody as he loves us, and the Lord makes no exception. Let us stand and offer our profession of faith.